So this is my very first podcast episode, and my guest today is Kathryn Hansen. And welcome to my show, Kathryn, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's get straight into it. You are very clear about the fact that someone who struggles with binge eating doesn't need to fix their life to overcome it, and that they are not mentally ill for binge eating, and that is just a primitive survival-driven brain response that they need to learn to recognize and dismiss. But from your experience coaching people, does the difficulty of stopping the habit of binging scale linearly at all with how much trauma or genetic predisposition a person has, or is the process of dismissing the urges pretty much identical regardless of how heavy someone's baggage might be?
Yeah, that's a really great question, right? We all come to recovery with a different past. We all come with different life experiences. We all come with similar brain patterns, but different brain patterns as well, right? We all have different conditioning, and
Yeah.
the habit develops in a slightly different way for all of us. So it's a great question as far as, are there things that affect recovery, as far as what's in your past, as far as any trauma you might have experienced, as far as any other conditions you may be struggling with. And from my experience of coaching people, I've been doing this work. I published Brain Over Binge in 2011, and I've been working with people basically ever since. So
Mm.
it's been a long time, and I've seen a lot of people come to recovery with different things. And I would say, like, a simple answer to your question is that yes, there are differences in how people respond to learning to dismiss urges based on what they have in their past. People who do have a more traumatic past, or their binge eating seems to be much more connected with emotions, and not that you have to solve those emotions. Like you said, I am clear that you don't have to solve your whole life to recover, but when there does feel like there's a very strong connection there, and when that pattern has developed between the emotions and the trauma and the binge eating, I do find it does take people longer, it does take more practice, it does take more unraveling of that connection. And
Hmm.
there are, many things that can create those sort of challenges in recovery. But when it fundamentally comes down to it, the process is still learning to dismiss the urges and learning to eat enough food. But yes, there are things that make that more challenging for some people than others.
Thank you for that answer. I think the same as well. For me,
Yeah.
I definitely think it had something to do with trauma, so it took a bit longer than I would have liked it to. But at the end
Mhm.
of the day, it's really just understanding that you don't have to act on the urge, and with time, it genuinely gets so much easier. Because, in the first week, it was like going through hell. I felt like I had barely any control over myself. I still messed up many times, but as time passed, it genuinely got so much easier. And at this point, I barely ever get an urge anymore. So I definitely
Great.
agree with you on there. And
Yeah,
binging,
that's amazing. And it's very what you explain, your personal story is very powerful, because it shows that even with a traumatic history, that you still can learn this. And yes, it may take longer, yes, it may take more practice, but you absolutely can learn it. And it's honoring the trauma that you've been through, honoring whatever your unique challenges are, because those are very real, and deserve your attention and deserve real solutions. But it's recognizing that binging is not the real solution, and that urge that leads you to binge, that's that faulty message from your brain. So you can dismiss that. You can learn to dismiss that. And once you do, then you're actually open to real solutions, and you have the space to find real solutions for
for sure.
whatever you're struggling with.
For sure, I agree 100%. And binging is always a choice, even mid binge, I think, but you also describe the urge as having a screw it quality that overrides everything. At what point does screw it stop being a feeling and start functioning like an actual loss of agency, do you think?
I want to make sure I'm clear on that. So you're talking about the screw it mentality. Can you
Yeah.
rephrase that?
So you describe the urge to binge as primarily a function of your primal brain, right?
Mhm. Yes.
But I think you said somewhere that it has a screw it quality. that overrides everything. Or maybe I read that wrong.
Yeah, like screw it, like it
Like,
doesn't matter. I just
yeah,
want to binge.
exactly, exactly. Like in the moment,
Yeah,
it doesn't matter at all, or that's what it feels like.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh, that's what the primal brain makes you feel like in those moments.
Yeah,
It's only focused on your immediate gratification, your immediate pleasure. I mean, I say that in quotes because we all know it's not true pleasure in the long run, but in the moment it feels like what you want or what you need. So it basically makes you a little bit blind to the rest of the things in your life. And even though you know at some level it's not right for you or it's going to affect your life in a negative way, the lower brain often comes in and says, "Screw it. It doesn't matter. You don't care. Just do it anyway." And it leaves your future self with the consequences. It's really only focused on getting what it thinks you need or what it senses that you need as far as the habit in that very moment. So there is definitely an immediacy to it or an urgency to it of like do it now and forget about everything else.
for sure. And is there any version at all of someone's situation where you would tell them to go fix the underlying issue first before tackling the behavior directly, or not at all? Because I think obviously you're again very clear about this, that it's not, you don't have to fix your life, but I wonder if there's any single situation where you would tell that person that they should probably work on fixing something first.
Something else, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question too, and I think it's one of the things that has evolved a little bit about what I've learned since I
Hmm.
started working with people, and I don't think you have to fix your life fully, right? Let's say you have depression, you don't have to wait for that depression to be completely alleviated in order to stop binging. But are there cases where I'm just using depression as an example, the depression is so bad that it just you can't even connect with any motivation to recover. You can't even bring yourself to want to stop this habit. Like you could feel so low that there's just zero motivation to dismiss the urges. Then in that case, as an example, would it be helpful to alleviate the depression just enough so that you can connect with motivation, so that you can start having some energy to have success and to build on that? I think absolutely. It can be the same with something like anxiety, where you could just get in such fight or flight and have so much of that, energy that it's really, really hard to make conscious choices in the moment. And if it's you're trying over and over again to dismiss the urges and it continues to be a challenge, then could alleviating some of that anxiety give you an edge in those moments that urges come up? I think absolutely. So it's really about looking at what is getting in your way of dismissing urges and
Hmm.
working on solutions to those things without feeling like you have to completely remedy those things in order to even start this process. You can basically work on both at the same time in order to give yourself the best chance possible to dismiss the urges.
Yeah, and you emphasize that dismissing an urge should be more of a passive process rather than white knuckling it with sheer willpower. But to someone in the thick of it, sitting there not binging while their brain screams at them, feels exactly like willpower at first, like white knuckling it. How does a person audit their own internal state to know if they are genuinely detaching versus just white knuckling it under a different name?
Mm. Yeah, the difference between what I teach as far as detaching and realizing your thoughts are not you and your these feelings are not necessarily indicative of your true wants and needs. That detachment, I try to explain that it is different than willpower. Willpower is more of a fighting against. Willpower is kind of assuming that you want the thing and you're denying it to yourself. You're saying, "No, I can't have that." Whereas detachment is recognizing that you truly don't want it, but the feeling of wanting is just a passing state. So you can be with or observe these feelings of wanting going through your body or all these thoughts that are driving you toward the binge. You can observe those and feel that feeling of wanting, but know at some level in your higher brain that this is not what you truly want. You're not denying yourself anything. I think that's the main difference is in willpower, it's a denial. It's a no. This is detachment is I don't truly want it. I'm just feeling like I want it temporarily. And it can be a subtle difference. And because those feelings are all still there with the urge, when the urge comes, you do feel that desire. That's completely normal. There are some moments when it can feel like willpower, and I think that's okay. I think some people that come to the brain over binge approach and learn about detachment and dismissing urges think that they should feel completely calm during the urges and completely like, "Oh, it's not me. I don't really want it." No, you're going to feel like you want it in that moment, and that's okay. And I think accepting that in some moments, it may feel like willpower. You may just feel like you have to control your actions and that's all you can do. Just focusing on not acting is the main thing. But over time, I do think having that different perspective of I don't truly want this, I think it makes dismissing urges over and over and over again, which you need to do to rewire your brain. I think it just makes it easier because if you're relying on sheer willpower and fighting and telling yourself no every time, it's just exhausting. So, all I guess, to sum it up, although there are going to be some moments that feel like willpower, the goal is to shift your perspective so that it doesn't feel like that all the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And coming off of that, do you think have you do you think meditating would help with this? Because I find with meditating in general, I have a lot more self control over my primal brain. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to your opinion about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great practice and I love that you find that helpful personally. It is
Thank
something
you.
that I do recommend to people. It's something I put in, the Brain Over Binge Recovery Guide, which was my second book, as a recommendation because there is research that it strengthens your higher brain, like, it strengthens the prefrontal cortex, and it's really about kind of detachment, like not
Yeah,
listening to your thoughts, about focusing on something in particular. There are many different forms of meditation, but it's basically about being in that moment and not letting your thoughts take control, of recognizing those thoughts are not you. So, any way you can practice that is amazing, and meditation is definitely a great way to practice that.
yeah, thank you for that answer. And in recent years, the link between ADHD, executive dysfunction, and binge eating, I think, has become a lot more apparent. And do you think that is there anything that people with ADHD should maybe approach this differently, or do you think it's pretty much the same?
I've definitely had that question come up. I did have a guest on my podcast, and I don't know if you can include links in your show notes to other podcasts, but
Yeah, for sure.
so I do have an episode about that, which I would love for you to include for people who do want to dive into it a little more.
For
They can
sure.
listen to that episode. I had a guest who is more of an expert than I am because I'm not an ADHD expert, but I do know that, yeah, people with ADHD do have a higher likelihood of struggling with binge eating. Binge eaters do have a higher likelihood of having ADHD. So there is some overlap there. And there's the impulsivity is probably part of it for sure. And like you said, the issues with executive functioning. But I do think that it's kind of like the issues I talked about before of the depression and the anxiety and sometimes you may need some help just to get the ADHD, let's say, under control enough so that you do have enough executive functioning to get the process rolling. And what I've found is most people that I've worked with personally with ADHD tend to have enough executive functioning, but it does take some more support, especially in like planning and making sure that their environment is set up to give themselves success. You don't want to set up your environment with really easy access to binge foods or like because you have to recognize that you are more impulsive and if eating regularly also becomes a challenge with people with ADHD, just kind of remembering to eat and planning meals, and that's so important in recovery to make sure that you're nourished consistently. If you get into those states of heightened hunger, it really sets off those survival instincts to make everything harder. So I do find that with a lot of planning, with support, medication if necessary, that it's definitely possible. And it comes down to what uniquely helps you learn to dismiss the urges or be successful in dismissing the urges. What uniquely helps you with eating adequately. And with ADHD, there could be some special considerations there. And anyone who has it, I would encourage you to listen to that podcast. But I hope that helps just recognize that it's not about saying, oh, you have ADHD, no big deal. You can still dismiss the urges. It's acknowledging that yes, you may have challenges for sure with this process, but there are solutions that you can implement to help give you a better chance of success.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you argue that physical restriction is the primary light switch that turns on the animal brain survival mechanism. But when chronic dieters stop restricting to quiet that mechanism, they often experience a period of weight gain or fluctuation. And that gain immediately triggers the exact psychological panic that makes them want to restrict or binge again. How do you coach someone through that?
Yeah, the weight issue is a tough one. It comes up very, very often. And just like we talked about, people come to the recovery process with all different history and past and trauma and genetics. People also come to the recovery process with different weights and different weight history. Like, just for an example, for myself, by the time I actually recovered, I was well over my natural weight because I was binging, and I really had mostly given up the restricting except as like to try to compensate for the binges. But I came to recovery as a much higher weight than my body naturally is. So when I nourished myself, when I ate enough, when I stopped the binging, it had the effect of reducing my calories back to a normal level. It eliminated the excess and I
Mm,
lost weight. And I find that that is very common for people and lost weight without dieting, without it. It definitely was a very healthy process of my body returning back to its natural size. And I see that very, very commonly with people because binging involves very much excess amount of calories. So people are often scared to give up restricting, but if the restricting is leading to binging, the calories that you get from restricting plus binging are typically way more than if you just ate a normal amount of food. So if you eat a just normal amount of food, it can have their effect of reducing calories and weight loss can occur. Now, that is a common scenario. Another scenario is if you're not above your natural weight from binging. If people who purge tend to be less, less over their natural weight or even underweight, people who
yeah,
are still like really, really heavily restricting and weight suppressing and binging, but the binging, yeah, it's they're still underweight. So with people who do come to recovery below their natural weight, it does involve a healthy restoration of weight, and that can be very challenging for people. And it's something that I think is extremely important to accept the futility of the current path. Like, it's basically impossible to stop it is impossible to stop binging on any long-term basis if you're still restricting. So it's
yeah,
recognizing that and really accepting the futility of it and seeing that even if there are some weight, some healthy weight that needs to be gained, it's gonna give you so many benefits in your life. It's gonna stop this horrible cycle of binging. Like, it's so worth it, and I think that's something that can be hard for people to accept, but once they do get over the hump and accept it, they are so happy they did. I've never had someone regret it, It's
yeah,
always like, "Oh my gosh, my body's so much healthier and functioning so much better," and trying to weight suppress is just against our biology and makes food the most important thing and makes you just consumed with wanting to eat. And they learn that, oh, when my body's healthy, food actually is not the highest priority. And I'm just
yeah,
functioning the way I should. And it's a deeper conversation. And since, I can't talk about all of it right now, I will give you another link you can put in the show description. It's at brainoverbinge.com/weight. I've put together all like
for
the
sure.
weight related resources and blog posts and podcast episodes that I do talk about that because it's a very nuanced conversation. I realize what I said only scratches the surface, but it's just about recognizing that you're coming to recovery at a different place than,
Yeah,
any other person and to accept that your body is going to do what it needs to do, whether that is shed weight in a healthy way because you're stopping binging or whether that's gain weight in a healthy way because you're stopping restricting and trust that your body will reach the size that you're meant to be.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think this was the part that I struggled the most with when I really implemented the things you talk about. I was also
Yeah.
into bodybuilding, so for me, like having abs and being a certain body fat percentage was like my main goal. But then
Yeah.
eventually I realized that if I keep restricting, then I'm never ever going to stop binging because I always used to eat like 1,200 calories per day, and on the weekends I would binge upwards from like 4,000 and 5,000 even,
Mm.
and it just completely undid everything. And it really took me a long time to trust my body again and to kind of like allow my hunger hormones to function normally again and not restrict myself. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's great.
And what's your stance on GLP-1s? Because nowadays I think it's really been getting more popular with the peptides and everything. And I know you said that people should still understand the ability to not binge whilst having food noise and urges to binge is still something that's needed even on GLP-1s. And I think you're 100% right, but can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, it's definitely another great question and a big question. A lot of these things are very nuanced. I don't I don't tell people they shouldn't do it, right? I'm going to support people in the decisions they make. But I think that if GLP-1s are used, they have to be used with utmost care and caution and with an eye for recovery, right? Not just to use them as a quick fix to lose weight or to stop the binging but not do the work. Like I think that they can have a place for people if they feel like they're just not getting the progress that they're looking for as far as being able to control the urges. Like I've had some people try them who said, "Okay, I'm not able to dismiss these urges. They get to me every time." It can be a tool that reduces the urges just enough or gives somebody just enough momentum to start getting practice and to start
Yeah,
building healthy habits. But I think that over time, you do need to actually experience the urges and not act on them to get that brain change. So if the GLP-1s are just shutting down the urges and you're not really getting that practice and having them and dismissing them, it's kind of bypassing the brain process that you need to undo in order to create lasting change. So what I've also seen is then people get off of them, the urges come back, they don't know how to dismiss them and they're kind of back to where they started. But
yeah,
if they can be used in a way to sort of get momentum, to learn to dismiss urges, because you still probably have some urges on them, at least when from the people I've talked to, and also to really, really make sure that you eat adequately. If this is something that you and your doctor decide is right for you, you have to eat enough food. I think it really runs the risk of people not eating enough and then putting themselves in that survival state, but it's the survival state is basically suppressed because it's suppressing those hunger hormones. So then if they come off of it, they're starved and the body at some level knows they're starved and then the binging
yeah.
can come back even worse. So I do think I like to think of it as far as binge eating goes, it's really a last resort. I do think people are absolutely capable of learning to dismiss the urges, of dealing with any challenges that they have, like you talked about ADHD, depression, anxiety, anything that affects recovery, try to see if you can work on those kind of things first before jumping to the GLP ones. I see a lot of people kind of wanting to jump to them as the quick fix, but
Yeah,
sometimes they can create more problems in the long run. And I'm not a
yeah.
doctor. I think all decisions should be up to you and your doctor. And I know they have other medical uses. I'm just talking about them in terms of stopping binging, learning to dismiss the urges. But I can consider them sort of a tool of last resort, but not a cure.
Hmm. I see. I really wonder about the long-term effects, to be honest, because I think more and more people are going to start getting on them, and unfortunately, I don't think most of them are ever going to come off. If I'm being honest, with the way that the things are going, I even heard that some companies are trying to engineer foods in a way now that even on GLP-1s, it bypasses the whole point of GLP-1s. So, for example, they would crave that food just the same even on GLP-1s, then
Oh,
like as
wow.
if they weren't on it. So I
Hmm.
really wonder how that's going to play out, and it's pretty scary to think about the levels that
Wow.
this could get to.
That is really scary. I haven't heard that, but it makes sense. Gosh, it's
Yeah,
like a competition between the
yeah,
food manufacturers and the pharmaceutical companies,
yeah. I
and
hope
we're kind of
it's
stuck in between, and
yeah,
it's sad, and I think yeah, it's one of those things that everybody has to look at the risks, look at the side effects, look at the benefits they're trying to achieve and see if it's worth it to them personally. And I like that you mentioned that we don't know the long-term risks. So that's part of the risk is the
yeah,
unknowing of what the long term will be as far as how it's going to affect you. So I do always want to encourage people to try it without, and I don't want to be presumptuous to know everybody's situation and what they need and use what you need, but as I'm sitting here today, as you're sitting here today, Edgar, like both of us were able to recover
yeah.
without that, and I've seen so many people recover without that. So if you can, I always think that's the better path.
For sure, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And have you found that people who successfully recover from binge eating frequently find themselves playing whack-a-mole with new compulsive behaviors like screen addiction or alcohol or smoking and so on? And does the method work exactly the same way for those transfers? Because I would imagine it does, because for me it definitely did. But I would love to hear your
Mhm.
stance on it as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely something that you commonly hear that, okay, if you give up one addiction or habit, you may transfer to another addiction or habit. You hear it with people, let's say, who stop smoking and then they start eating too much, or people who stop drinking. And then, it's definitely the quality of reward seeking that I think is at play here. And people who have higher tendencies toward reward seeking or have more reward sensitivity or get greater highs from rewards um, tend to struggle more with habits, addictions, substance use, things like that. I don't think it makes you destined to struggle with substance use. It just is one of those tendencies that you need to be aware of within yourself if you feel like you are a person who has an attraction to those more stimulating behaviors or tend to get caught up in those more stimulating behaviors, which back to ADHD, that has a correlation with ADHD as well. So if you're someone who is like that, it's something to be very aware of as far as like, okay, if I dismiss my urges to binge, my lower brain still wants that reward, so then it or a similar reward, it still wants that dopamine, so it's going to make some other behavior feel appealing. And it's
Yeah,
recognizing that the urge for the other behavior is also just an urge. You don't have to take that any more seriously. And sometimes this process of really it's not that you have to sit around and do nothing, right? If there's another behavior that's less harmful that helps you as you're letting go of binging, great, do it, right? But I don't think it's helpful to transfer to, let's say you stop binging, don't transfer to alcohol. Find a behavior that's like less
yeah,
harmful. That's, going for a walk, I mean that's a great behavior. But if you can find stimulating things that satisfy that sort of dopamine rush. If you want to scroll for a while, fine. I think that's much better than binging.
for
But
sure.
over time, you don't want to become so reliant on other things that you just feel like you have to have that dopamine all the time or you don't know how to function. I think at some point it is it's helpful to realize that okay, my dopamine system just needs to reset. I just need to maybe be
Yeah,
bored for a while. I just need to learn to be okay with not being stimulated and realize that there's a gift in that and there's growth in that. Like that constant stimulation, the constant reward seeking, it really is pretty exhausting, and
yeah,
it doesn't typically give people what they truly want, is which is typically to go after meaningful connections and goals and find purpose in their life and really connect with who they are and who they want to be. And if you're constantly just seeking dopamine, that never really happens. So it's recognizing that if you do want to connect with more of a purpose for your life and more yeah, just more of your higher goals, you might have to be bored for a little while in
yeah,
order to start to get the same pleasure or a different kind of pleasure from those more meaningful things.
yeah. I think it's so sad today that being bored is seen as this horrible thing. Like people will do everything to not be bored, but I think being bored is
Yeah.
one of the most useful things you could do. Like so many people genuinely don't even know what they want their lives to look like, and
Yeah.
they would just rather scroll for hours than sit down for 10 minutes and just think about it. I think that's pretty sad. I see it with my friends as well. And I really
Yeah.
wish that somehow I could, without sounding like I know it all or something like that, that I could explain to them that maybe they should try just being bored for a while, you know?
Mhm. Especially, with young people, I totally agree. I have kids who
Mm,
aren't too much younger than you and like older teenagers and yeah, they get caught up in this and it's hard to as when I was a kid, we just were bored
yeah,
sometimes and that's
yeah,
okay. So there is more temptation now and it's okay to recognize that you are drawn to it, but when you constantly follow that urge, it's not giving you what you want. So you just like you can dismiss an urge to binge, you can dismiss an urge for any dopamine seeking behavior that you deem to be harmful and you deem to be interfering with where you want your life to go. And when you dismiss that urge, sometimes there's that more flat feeling that's in its place. But I think that flat feeling or the bored feeling can be such a gift and such a launching pad for then you get to actually discover what you truly want. You get to actually discover what's truly satisfying to you.
yeah. I agree 100%. And if you remember, can you maybe walk me through what the early months actually look like for you day to day after you have recovered in terms of being bored and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time for me now. It's been
Yeah.
over 20 years. And it's interesting because I remember thinking that for a long time that, oh, if I recover, my life is going to be wonderful and I'm going to have, so much fun. It's going to be amazing and I'm going to not have any problems. And it was this really kind of unrealistic picture of
Yeah.
recovery. Where and I also thought because I spent so long believing I had to solve all my emotional issues and I had to solve every problem in my life in order to stop binging, I kind of viewed recovery as this problem-free, emotionally healthy life.
Yeah.
And when I actually just learned to dismiss the urges despite anything else that was going on, really learned to not binge no matter what, I just became a person who didn't binge. It didn't I mean, it gave me a lot of benefits, don't get me wrong, like, I didn't have to deal with all the pain and the shame and the days
Yeah.
of really overexercising and trying to burn it off and doing it was a completely exhausting cycle, so it removed all that pain from the binging, but as far
Yeah.
as just my regular life, it just went on as usual. I went to work every day. I had, I had my share of problems. I had some relationship issues at the time. I had family issues at the time and all that continued. And I was like, "Oh, so I'm just a person now who
Yeah.
doesn't binge and I don't have to deal with life perfectly. It doesn't have to feel good all the time." In the past, like when life didn't feel good or I had a strong emotion, I would just think, "Oh, well, what's the point of stopping binging anyway?" My lower brain would say, back to
Yeah.
that screw it mentality, oh, screw it, just binge. But I learned that, like, oh, okay, even if life is hard, even if I have strong emotions, I can still dismiss the urge and just go on with life as usual. And then over time, the urges went away. I mean, it took about, I typically remember about the first 3 weeks were like the hardest, then 3 months were
Mm-hmm.
got a lot more effortless after 3 months, and the urges completely went away. For me, about like 9 months was
Mm-hmm.
the time frame that I remember, just not really having them anymore. I mean, definitely still had normal cravings or desires for food, but it wasn't that idea of eating as much food as possible. Just seemed like the opposite of anything I would ever want to do at that point. So, yeah, I hope that gives an idea as far as like the fading of the urges and then just like when you stop binging, you just stop binging. It doesn't magically
Yeah.
cure the rest of your life.
Yeah, for sure. In a weird way, I think binge eating, I think also gives people a sense of having, like, making progress, I think, because I also used to struggle with binging and then over exercising, and it almost
Mhm.
felt like a mission that I had to do, and so it almost gave me a sense of purpose in a weird way. And that
Yeah.
was really hard to, like, wrap my head around and understand how to actually set other goals, like actual goals for myself, and use my energy for those rather than keeping myself stuck in this cycle.
Yeah, that's a great point is that it just becomes very familiar.
Yeah.
And even if it's harmful, it's just at least you know what to do. And even the attempts to recover feel like a mission or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna try to recover and try this new thing. Okay, I binge. Now I need to undo the binge. Now I need to overexercise. Now I need to restrict. Then I binge again. So yeah, it sort of sets a framework for your life that is predictable, but it's also extraordinarily painful.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay when you come out of that to recognize, okay, I don't have that same routine, that same structure. It's kind of like losing a terrible job that you hated,
Yeah.
but at least you knew what to do. And now
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I lost that job. I need to find a new one. And even if I don't have any clue right now, at least I don't have to go to that terrible job anymore. So maybe that analogy will help people
Yeah.
see
That
that
was a
they can move on from that.
yeah, I think that was a perfect analogy for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. I don't know if you've seen this, but nowadays the carnivore diet is also like really big, and lots of people are like, every modern food is poison and just eat meat and cheese. I wonder, I'm
Yeah.
curious, what's your stance on that?
Yeah. I I think everyone should eat in the least restrictive way that's possible for them. Like as far as try not to ban foods unless you have a really good reason as far as medically, obviously food allergies, food sensitivities. Like I understand again, people come to recovery with different places and with different needs. I think that one is extraordinarily overly restrictive.
I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of like fake doctors almost on the internet saying that if you do this and that, then people say
Yeah.
stuff even like you can go from having brown eyes to having blue eyes, which is
Oh
kind
wow.
of insane. And I think from what I've noticed, the war carnivore movement is almost they have the goal to just like become more than or not more like above the average person, like it's a very narcissistic thing almost. So I think it comes
Mm,
more from that rather than actually like medical advice and stuff like that. So but
yeah.
so many people fall for it. I almost fell for it too, to be honest. But yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, there's so much pressure these days about different diets. And it's always, I think, throughout, at least through my lifetime, it's always been one thing or another, or the next big thing, or the next food you're not supposed to eat, or the next food you're supposed to eat a lot of. And it's so hard to keep up. I mean,
Yeah.
a long time ago, meat and cheese were considered not healthy and not heart
Yeah.
healthy and not good for you. And now it's like
Yeah.
that's all you should eat. It's very confusing to people, and I do think it's super important to find what works for you and what makes you feel good, what makes you feel satisfied, what helps you reach your other goals in life as far as like socializing or eating out or enjoying life or enjoying different events. Like what everyone, I don't have a specific eating plan that I recommend people. I mean,
Hmm.
it's all about eating enough. I do recommend people get nutritionist help if they need, but I do strongly believe that eating all of the macros is very stabilizing. This
Yeah.
and as you're recovering, that you do need carbs, you do need fats, you do need protein, and you
Yeah.
need to eat them in ratios that work for you. But I think anytime you're cutting out an entire group like that, like you're cutting out all carbs, like in carnivore, I just don't think that is supportive to recovery.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of uh, people on many different sides of this, right? You'll have people saying if you cut out all carbs, you won't even have binge urges anymore
Yeah.
and you'll be totally fine. It's almost like presented as a cure. I have not seen that to be successful. First of all, it's very difficult, and I think it sets up a powerless mindset for a lot of people that okay, they think eliminating carbs is their cure. So if they do eat a carb, which is like we
Yeah.
need them. If they do eat a
Yeah.
carb, they think they're powerless. They go on to binge. So, just to sum that up, I do think that getting all the macros is very important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Do you think there's is there anything that you feel like you got maybe wrong in your the first edition of your book, or maybe simplified too much?
Yeah, I did come out with the second edition. It's been a few years now. Well, 2022, I came out with the second edition, and the first
Yeah.
edition was in 2011. And the main things I talked about were I think I might have been a little too harsh on therapy on my first book. I mean, I did say it was well-meaning, it definitely was, but I think I just had some, maybe resentment is the right word, I'm not sure, but
Mhm.
my therapist really did, and not just my therapist, but the mainstream thought at the time was, "This is a psychological, emotional issue. You
Yeah,
have you're basically broken. You need to figure out your whole, you know, fix all these psychological and emotional problems in order to stop binging." And I went down that rabbit hole for so long, and I just feel like it led me in the wrong direction. I feel like it perpetuated the cycle. It made me connect binging with so many other things in my life when the cause truly was a diet. I had restricted,
yeah,
I had set my brain in a survival state. My brain reacted to get me to binge as a way to try to protect me. And then everyone told me I was broken and doing it for emotional reasons. And sure, there were emotional things that were wrapped up in there. And I talk about that in my books. But I feel like I was too much anti therapy because I do think, like we've talked about in this conversation, they can work together where maybe you do need to get some things sorted out in order to give yourself that edge. You definitely don't have to solve your whole life. So I think the two approaches are compatible. And even if you are someone who feels like it's really important for you to work on learning to cope and work on learning to manage all your emotions, like that's all wonderful. And you still have to learn to dismiss this automatic urge from your brain. Like regardless of
yeah,
what you're doing elsewhere, the urge is still going to come up because that's how the brain is conditioned. So you can do both at the same time. So I hope that that was conveyed more in the second edition of the book than the first.
yeah. And building on that, what's the most important or useful thing you've learned after the second edition? Is there anything you think was that you wish you wrote into that or talked
Um,
about it?
it seems like the as soon as I published the book, that's when all the GLP-1 stuff really took off.
Hmm.
So I do feel like that is missing in
Oh
the
yeah,
second edition, and maybe I'll write another one. The thought is a little overwhelming to me right now, but maybe at some point I will write another book to include that. And that was tough. Like as that came out, I was like, "Oh, how does this change
yeah,
things?" And I tried to maintain an open mindset about it. And over time, I've found that, like I said, even if this is a tool for people, you still just like with the last thing I talked about, you still need to learn to dismiss urges because even
yeah,
on GLP-1s, you're going to have some urges. And you still need to learn to eat adequately because we've seen people with side effects of losing too much muscle mass and bone mass. And like on these GLP-1s, you still need to nourish your body. So in the brain over binge approach, there's two fundamental goals of learning to dismiss urges, learning to eat adequately. And I think those are applicable, like regardless of what other tools you're bringing in, or regardless of what medication you're taking, regardless of what therapy you're using, you can always use those the recovery goals of dismissing urges and eating adequately to support anything else you're doing.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I wonder, have you heard about looks maxing? This is the new like teens are
Yes.
basically
Yes.
obsessed with their looks and stuff.
Big yes. I
And
have 4
yeah,
teenagers and that it's a personal like I have a personal problem with it because I just
hmm,
see how it affects and affects my children, their friends, like makes them feel bad about themselves. I just don't like it. But yes,
yeah,
continue with your question.
yeah. So I wonder your stance on that because it also goes into again like with the carnivore and everything. Like the whole approach is really weird. Like again, the point there is not to eat for health or anything like that. Is to eat as little as possible to be as lean as possible, basically. And
Yeah.
how do you think this is going to affect the teenagers today and the upcoming generations?
Yeah. I mean, it's sad. I think we're veering too much as a society
Yeah,
away from having just value for being a person and
yeah,
for what we bring to the table as far as just being kind and intelligent and anything that we bring as humans, we're being boiled down to like it only matters what you look like.
yeah,
And just I think that's harmful and I think it has the risk of leading to more eating disorders because if you're
for sure.
manipulating how you're eating and you're stop listening to your hunger cues because you're trying to looks max and you're trying to give yourself that perfect body and that perfect look, it has the risk of setting you up for those survival related binges because your biology is meant to have enough food. It's meant to
Yeah,
nourish yourself and it reacts and tries to protect you. We learned that way back in the Minnesota starvation experiment
yeah,
when, healthy men were deprived of food and had all these psychological symptoms and developed binging and obsession with food. So I
yeah,
think it's going to lead to more food obsession, probably more binging if people are restricting themselves, and also just that over attachment to looks being the most important thing when like you have so much more to bring to the table than what you look like.
yeah. For sure, I agree. I think I feel really bad for kids these days, especially because most of them are growing up spending more time on the screens than being outside. And even when I was a kid, that wasn't really the case. But the past
Yeah.
10 or 5 years, it has, and I really feel like it has made pretty much everything worse because when you're inside all day just looking at a screen, not moving your
Mhm.
body, not really, only eating to look better as well, it's you pretty much get yourself to become a mentally ill person, I think so. And with the
Yeah.
GLP-1s these days as well, I think it's going to be pretty chaotic with the next with teens these days and kids younger than that as well. I really wonder how that's going to affect people, I guess. Like, it's scary to think about.
Yeah, for sure. It just creates so much comparison. That's what I
Yeah,
see. And as far as the phones, and you're seeing people who are, I don't know, it's just so hard to live up to that
yeah,
expectation. And yeah, like you said, I think it's going to lead to worse mental health outcomes, probably worse eating disorder outcomes. And, time will tell, but I'm hoping we start trending in another direction.
yeah, I hope so too. I mean, with history, that's usually the case because when something goes too extreme, then it goes to the other side. So I really hope that's gonna be
Yeah.
the case here as well. But it's really hard because when you're spending all your time on a screen, you're looking at actors and celebrities who have had like 10 surgeries performed and stuff, and you're comparing yourself to them, and maybe they
Yeah.
have the best nutritionists in the world and they are taking GLP-1s and everything, and you're still comparing yourself to them because you just don't know any better, and then you think that that's the norm. So, but when you go outside, it's pretty obvious that that's really not the norm. So I think
Yeah.
just going outside would be really helpful for most young people, I think. I wish I could
Oh,
have
for
told that to myself when I was like 15.
I know. Yeah, it's so true. And I think it's so helpful for people in recovery too. Like as you're letting go of binging and restricting and this obsession with food is really just to not follow all that stuff on social media, unfollow everyone you can
Yeah,
who's promoting that sort of stuff because when that's constantly feeding your brain, it's not giving yourself recovery promoting material. It's about getting outside, finding what you enjoy, finding what satisfies you, letting go of that food obsession. So it really helps to stop following everything that feeds that obsession.
yeah, I agree. I think it's also weird to think about how digitalized the world is becoming. Like in my region, Romania, yeah, a part of it is called Transylvania, and we're all pretty old-fashioned here. Like we have
Mhm.
like horse carts and stuff. Like most
Oh, nice.
farmers still use those, so it's like almost kind of like the Middle Ages. And people used to not have like credit cards, for example, for a very very long time, but now there's this new law that everyone must have one in order to just be able to pay their bills. And that made me think about that maybe in the future, this is an extreme example, but maybe in the future we will be required to have like chips inserted onto us and stuff like that, and
Oh
just
gosh, yeah.
overall being spending more time in like on in a reality that doesn't even exist than in the real world. And it's so interesting to think about with terms of eating and just health and everything, like how that's gonna look like. I feel like I keep repeating the same thing, but it's just really fascinating to me to think about because it's 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 genuinely hard to even think about again. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah,
Yeah, it makes sense, and I hope, people like you can affect change, and,
I hope so.
I've been doing this work for a long time, and I wanna continue doing it, but it's great to see younger people to wanna get involved and to wanna inspire others to not go down that unhealthy path.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect place to leave it. So thank you so much
Okay.
for saying yes to this. Again, it means a lot to me. And I have one final question. What's a question that you have for my next guest for my podcast? And this can be anything. I don't know what is it going to be yet, but I want to make this into a thing, So if you have a
Okay.
question, yeah.
Hmm. Is it going to be eating disorder
No, it can
related?
be anything.
Anything?
Yeah,
Goodness, this is tough. You put me on the spot here. I think just in so we've been talking about like finding meaning, finding purpose in our life, and talking about how we are more than just what we look like. I would say, like, what gives you meaning in your life?
perfect. Thank you so much.